Hi there, welcome back to Resin by Drew. Now today I'm going to try, I know a lot of people are still struggling with getting their flowers to bloom, so I'm going to try and go through as many different things for you to try as possible. So personally, I can only speak from personal experience, but personally I found not all resins will make flower blooms. They might for other people, but they haven't for me. So the resin that I use personally is this one, which is called craft resin. It's in a big box. Craft resin. Now it says it's a low viscosity resin on the box, but it's actually more like a medium viscosity, and I've never had, apart from one time where it was my own fault, because I tried to use white that had been stood from another project after it had been stood too long. I've never had a bad bloom from this. I know a lot of people also use Resin Pro Art Pro Deluxe, and I will do, I haven't tried blooms with that, but I will do, possibly for my next video, because I want as many people to be able to achieve this effect as possible, because I understand it took me quite a while to find out what I was doing wrong. So I understand people when they're getting frustrated about not being able to get their blooms right. So first of all, you need to look at the resin. As I say, not all resins will work. You need a medium to high viscosity resin, and although the craft resin says it's a low viscosity, personally to me it is much more of a medium viscosity than a low viscosity, and I know that most people that have tried craft resin have said the same thing, that it is more of a medium viscosity than a low viscosity. So the first thing is the actual resin itself. The next thing is letting the resin sit for as long as it needs to sit. Now I aim for about 40 degrees in my resin. Now it depends on the temperature of the room, the humidity, etc, etc, but as I say, I aim for 40 degrees. Now that means that today I've left my resin for just 15 minutes and we're currently at 40.6 degrees. So I would, and that's Celsius. I'm not sure what that is in Fahrenheit. You'd have to Google and check and convert that to Fahrenheit. I'm afraid I don't know what it is in Fahrenheit, but that's 40 degrees Celsius. Excuse me. So that's the next thing, getting the resin to the right temperature. Now I would suggest one of the easiest ways is to find out what the working time of your resin is, and I would say you're looking around sort of 50 to 70% of that time to get to the right temperature of your resin, depending on the weather, etc, and the heat of your room, etc, etc. But as I say, the easiest way for me is to go by temperature, but because I've got so used to it now, I can go by time and not necessarily take the temperature. Normally I leave it for 25 minutes, but because the weather at the moment is quite hot, I'm down to leaving it for just 15 minutes. So the next stage, I'm going to make my white. So I'm going to take out the resin from my pot. I've reached the right temperature, so I'm going to take the resin out from my pot and I'm going to make my white. So I'll just pour that out, and then the rest of the resin I'm going to share between the moulds. I'm using a mould from Molds and Shapes, and it's their round holographic mould. I have used it a lot and I really do love it. I love the holographic effect on this one. I'm not sure what the excuse me, I'm not sure what the holographic effect is actually called, but I do love the holographic effect on this one. Let me just check there, see which ones need a little bit more. Now personally, I don't fill my moulds to the top. I know a lot of people do, but personally I don't, because I like to leave room for a backing layer. So whether I want to put something dark, something coloured, some glitter or something like that, I like to leave a backing layer, but you don't necessarily have to do that. You can fill your resin all the way to the top if you like. The other reason that I use craft resin, the Make craft resin that is because it's also got a heat resistance built into it. So it's heat resistant, I think up to 93 degrees Fahrenheit, no, centigrade, Celsius. I think that's 200 degrees Fahrenheit, but I could be wrong on that. So that's the other reason that I use that. Now sometimes I put my craft resin down first. If I'm doing a backing layer, then I might use a different resin from a backing layer, because craft resin is quite expensive, and because I don't need the heat resistance on the bottom of the coaster, I might use a different resin for that, in which case I generally use Resin Pro Transparent. So we've got our resin to the right temperature. We've discussed a couple of resins that I know work, or one at least that I know definitely works, one which I'm going to do a video on next. We've got the resin in the mould. Now we're going to make the white. Some people say that the white that you use makes a difference. Whether it does or not, I'm not sure, but my go-to white pigment is the Resi-Tint Max in titanium white, just because I found what works. So what's the saying? If it's not broken, don't fix it. So I found what works for me, so that's what I tend to stick to. Now if you put too much pigment in, it will sink and it will become blobby. So the best thing to do, the pigment always sinks to the bottom, so you need to give the pigment a good stir first of all. So give the pigment a good stir, scrape off your stick. So all I've got left on is what's on the sides and the tiniest little bit that's left from not being scraped off on the stick. I don't know if you can see that. So I'm going to put that into my pot, and then as I stir my pot, the white's going to come off. The white on the stick will come off. I will scrape it as well. I'm also going to use a couple of drops of Pinata pearl alcohol ink. I know a lot of people use Pinata Blanco alcohol ink, which is just the same thing, but it's not a pearl colour. Some people don't use any alcohol ink at all, and they have just as good results. So the alcohol ink is not a necessity, I don't think, but for me I use it because I like the effect that it gives. So I'm mixing the white pigment in. You don't want it too opaque at this point. You want it like I don't know how the best way to describe it, sort of semi-skimmed milk consistency, not consistency, sorry, it's colour. And then I always scrape off my stick and then add my alcohol ink. So I'm going to add, I've got quite a bit of the white pigment, so I'm going to add 8 drops of the alcohol ink. So I'm just giving it a good shake because this does separate. So I put ball bearings into my bottle for this. So I'll add 8 drops. And I'm going to give that a good stir, and then I'm going to check the colour of my pigment. And I just want to be able to see the stick as it comes, as it starts to slide, as the white pigment starts to slide off. I just want to be able to see the stick through the pigment, which I can, so I'm happy with that. So I'm going to pour that into my piping bag. I'm just going to set that aside for a minute while I sort out the alcohol inks. Now I'm going to use different coloured alcohol ink in each of the coaster molds just because I can. The alcohol inks that I'm using are all Resin8 brand. The first one is Pina Colada, the next one is Grasshopper, followed by Blue Hawaiian, followed by Amethyst, which is one of my current favourites. So we'll start with Amethyst, and I'm just going to add probably 4 drops to the middle of the coaster. I love these alcohol inks that started coming in these with the droppers now. It makes life so much easier, it really, really does. I have got a code as well to, I think, gets 5% off the Resin8. It will be in the description box below. I've also got a code for the craft resin that gets 10% off. Now I get a monthly subscription on the craft resin, so it works out a lot cheaper. As I say, I have got a code that's in the description box below that'll get you 10% off. I think it's 10% off each order with craft resin as well, so that's a really good offer. So I'm just going to add the last pigment, which is the last alcohol ink rather, which is the Pina Colada, and it's in the old style bottle. So I'll probably struggle to get the lid off, oh no, it's come off quite easily. I usually struggle to get the lids off these. 3, 4 drops. Right, okay, so we've got the alcohol ink in each of the coaster molds, and then I'm going to take my little scissors. I'm going to get my piping bag, and I'm going to snip a tiny hole in the end of my piping bag. So there's no magic, not doing anything special. Snip a tiny hole. I can't show you the hole that I'm snipping, but it is literally just a couple of millimeters. The reason I can't show you is because the end of it would probably fly off into one of the molds. And then I check the size of the hole. Now that's a bit too small, so is it? No, that's not bad actually. That's okay, we can live with that, I think. No, actually I'm going to make it a fraction bigger. We don't want to just live with it, we want it to be right, don't we? So just make it a fraction bigger. Now I've seen, so it's coming out, I'm not squeezing it, and it's coming out in that sort of thickness. I don't know if you can see, I hope you can see that. So that's a good thickness for the piping to be coming out at. Now I've seen people do all sorts of shapes, and it doesn't seem to matter what you do, whether you do zigzag squiggly lines, the most beautiful spirals, whatever you do, if it's going to bloom, it's going to bloom anyway. So we'll do a few different shapes, I think. And I'll show you what I mean, but of course each shape that we do for the piping will give us a slightly different effect on the flower. So we'll start off with a spiral. You want your resin, you want your pigment, your white pigment to be coming out not too thin, but you don't want it too thick. If it's too thin, there's not enough pigment there that's going to be able to bloom, so it just won't bloom. So we've done a spiral. On this one, let's do a flower shape on this one. I always think this looks like a chrysanthemum. I hope you can see the thickness of the piping that's coming out, because that's the sort of thickness that you want to be aiming for, because then, as I say, you've got enough pigment there to allow it to bloom. The next one, let's do some petals on this one. Now when you're doing petals, it's sometimes, because you keep coming back to the center, you can get a build-up of pigment in the center that can become a bit blobby on the other side. So I usually don't come to the center after I've done my first row of petals. I usually avoid coming to the centre so that I'm not getting too much of a build up, because that's the other thing that most people want to avoid, the blobs. I'll just do a little line coming out as well. And on this one, let's do, what should we do on this one? We'll do this sort of flower shape on this one. So the flower shapes, it's a flower shape, but it's not going to be joining like the other one. It's just going to be like a circle of flower shape, if that makes sense. Don't worry if you have to stop it halfway through as you're going round along one of your lines. Don't worry if you have to stop and adjust your piping bag. Just stop, adjust your piping bag and carry on. That really won't make a difference. As you can see, this one's already, the spiral's already starting to bloom, the one that I did first. So next I'm going to take my dotting tool and I'm just going to make some flower shapes in my resin. I'm not dragging the dotting tool to the bottom. I'm literally just dragging it across the top of the resin, and I'm coming inwards. It doesn't matter whether you go inwards or outwards, but obviously each one will give a slightly different effect. I think we'll do a combination of both inwards and outwards on this one. And we'll go out. It's nice to come out sometimes because it helps to drag the alcohol ink out a little bit as well. Okay, I'm going to do the same on this one. Although it's flower shaped, I'm just going to highlight the flower shape a little bit. Again, I'm not dragging my dotting tool along the bottom, partly because I don't want to spoil my mould, I don't want to scratch the mould, and partly because you just don't need to. All you need to do is just do the top of the resin. And of course this, what you're seeing at the moment, will be flipped over, so you're actually seeing it upside down at the moment. Now I'm not going to do anything with this one except a little swirl in the middle. I'm going to do a swirl in the middle on these two as well. I don't want a big swirl, just a little swirl in the middle of each. And then the same on this one. I'm going to come inwards. And I'll do a swirl in the middle as well.
You in there?
Yeah. I'll just do a little swirl in the middle on that one as well. And that's it. Now that's all I need to do. So what you're seeing now is exactly the top of the coaster that you will see. So it'll be flipped upside down when I take it out. I'm not going to explain this very well at all. We'll turn it over and this will be the top of the coaster. So that's all I'm going to do with it. I'm going to leave it to cure overnight. As you can see, these are blooming beautifully already, and I always think if they're starting to it doesn't necessarily have to start to bloom before you finish, but if it is starting to bloom before you've finished, it's always a good sign that it's going to bloom nicely. So that's all I'm going to do with them. I'm going to leave them to cure up overnight, and I will be back tomorrow to show you the results. Now if there's anything else that I can think of that I forgot to mention in the meantime, then obviously I'll try and remember to bring that up tomorrow. If you have any questions, please ask them in the comments. No question, the only question that's silly is a question that you don't ask. I can guarantee if you're thinking of a question, somebody else will be thinking of the same question. So even if you don't normally comment or you're shy, but you have a question, please just ask the question in the comments. You don't have to see the people that might read the comments. You don't have to feel silly at all. And I will do everything I can to help, because I want people to be able to achieve blooms and nice blooms. There's nothing more satisfying than getting a beautiful bloom. And I know how many people are struggling and what a struggle it is. And it's so frustrating when you think you're doing everything right, and you probably are doing everything right, but like I say, it could be down to the resin, it could be down to the fact you're not quite leaving it long enough. There are so many variables, but I wanted to do a beginner's guide to flower blooms, so this is what we're doing today. So I'm going to say bye for now, and I will be back tomorrow and we'll have a look at these results together. So bye for now, and I'll see you tomorrow. Hi, welcome back. Now, I normally wouldn't record putting a backing coat on, but because I'm doing a beginner's guide, I thought it was only fair that I show you the whole process from start to finish. So these are the coasters that I did yesterday. I'm going to put a backing layer of glitter. It's a champagne coloured glitter that I'm using. I'll put the link in the description below. I'm not adding a lot of glitter, I just want a hint of glitter. I'm using a different resin to the resin that I've used for the rest of the coasters. As I said yesterday, I tend to use a cheaper resin because craft resin is quite expensive because it's got the heat resistant properties. I tend to use Resin Pro Transparent resin to backfill my coasters. So that's what I'm using today. So I'm using Resin Pro Transparent, and I've added my glitter. I'm just giving it a stir. I'm happy with that. So I'm literally just going to pour this into the coasters and then leave this to cure up overnight. Yeah, as I say, I wouldn't normally record this, but I don't think it's fair on a beginner's guide to just come back and say, oh, well, this is how it's ended up. I think it's only fair that I show you the whole thing. So there we go. I forgot to say yesterday, I didn't use heat on the coasters. The craft resin that I use has got it's very good at dispersing its own bubbles, so I don't usually need to. And I know some people use heat on theirs to start the bloom process rolling, but if the bloom process has already started for me, which it had yesterday, then I didn't need to use the heat. So that's the reason I didn't use heat gun or any kind. I don't use a heat torch. The only thing that I use is a heat gun, but that's the reason I didn't use one yesterday, because simply I didn't need to. Sometimes in winter, if I need to get the resin going a little bit or get the bloom going a little bit, then I'll use a little bit of heat from a heat gun. But I never use a heat torch because I don't want to destroy my molds. The molds are expensive at the end of the day, so I want to look after them as well as I can and keep them going for as long as I possibly can. But if I don't need to, if the gas bubbles or if the little bubbles expel themselves, which usually happens with the craft resin, then so much the better. And if the bloom process starts itself, then again so much the better, and it just means that I can avoid using the heat. So that's that. So I've put the glitter on now. So again, I'm just going to leave it to sit overnight, and then tomorrow I'll be back and it will be ready to demold. I've made a note, I've just gone through the video that I did yesterday, and I've made a note of what kind of flower I did on each of the different colours, so that when we come to demold tomorrow I can tell you that this one was the spiral, and this one was the flower that looked like a chrysanthemum, and this one was the flower that was in circular shapes, etc, etc, so that you can see, it gives you some sort of idea of the finished result depending on what shape of or what style of flower you're doing in the first place. So hopefully that'll be helpful for tomorrow. So that's it, so I'm going to say goodbye for now, and I will be back tomorrow with the final result. So I will see you, excuse me, I will see you then. Bye for now. Hi there, welcome back. We're going to demold these coasters that we did, the blooming coasters, as part of the blooming coasters for beginners guide. I can see I have got a little bit of overspill on one that I'll have to trim, but that's not going to make a difference. So I'll demold them all and then we'll have a look at them. Sneak peek at that one there. I didn't look, I promise I didn't look on purpose, because I didn't want to see it until I unveiled it properly. There's the bit of overspill that I might just have to trim off. Just move the mould out of the way. I'll get some black card. Go. We'll start with this one. Oh, that's beautiful. That's bloomed beautifully. Now I made myself a little note so that I could go back and have a look and remember which style petals that I've done, to give you an idea of how they will look when they come out, depending which style you use. Because if you remember, we used 4 different styles, used a different style on each one. So this is the grasshopper, so this was a spiral, so we did a spiral, we did spiral piping on this one, and this is how the pipings come out. It is actually one of my favourite looks. It's one of the easiest to do, and it's one of my favourite looks. I just love how it blooms. You know, you've got more than one layer to it. I love it, I love it, really do. So that's one, that's the grasshopper one. This one is the amethyst. Again, you can see how that's bloomed. Now the amethyst we did as a flower shape, like it was the one that looked like, it reminds me of a chrysanthemum, because it's like you have flowers, you start off with a flower shape in the middle, and then you just keep adding more and more flowers, and it ends up looking like the head of a chrysanthemum because you've got so many flowers. But that's how that's bloomed. I think the spiral looks a little bit more delicate. I don't know if you would agree. But that's the two of them, that's 2 styles. The next one we've got is the Pina Colada. I've got a few little bits of overspill on this one. Pick those off. Now the Pina Colada, we did circle flower shapes. So we did flower shapes, but we did them in circles. So again, it's bloomed beautifully. And you can see it again, it's a very slightly different look. See if I can pick up a little bit of the holographic effect. Might have got a bit just there. There, I think. Hopefully. I will take some still shots at the end, and that usually picks up the holographic effect better than live video, so I will try it at the end as well. And then the last one is the Blue Hawaiian, and we did petal shaped with lines on this one. So they've bloomed beautifully, but there's not as much to them if you have a look at them. It's just purely a matter of preference and different styles. I mean, you could do more petal shapes, but we just did a few petal shapes and we did the lines in between. but what we've done has bloomed absolutely beautifully. And then we did the swirl in the middle, so I'm really happy with those. I hope you like them. I hope it gives you some ideas as to why your blooms might not be working straight away, and I hope it gives you some ideas as to the different style flowers that you can try to do to see how they come out, and I hope you like them too. So I will be back with another experiment shortly, but until then I will see you soon. Bye for now.